There are no principled wars. There are only pragmatic wars. Hello, I'm Jake Huffaker, and you're watching Morally Right. In this episode, we're talking about Iran. And when I say there are no principled wars, I mean all of these wars always have civilian casualties. They have collateral damage. They have what we call blowback. They have soldiers who die, American and abroad. And those abroad soldiers are typically fighting for their own pragmatic reasons. They're fighting for their country or their philosophy or whatever, and are debatably innocent, and certainly their deaths are often a tragedy. And so we talk about war. War is hell. War is always hell. Whether you have a ground invasion or an aerial bombing or whatever you're talking about. Whether you're talking about even just espionage. The amount of evil that we've done, that other countries have done, that the world has to do in order to have effective espionage, to have an effective war. War is hell. There's no principled hell. There might be a pragmatic short-term pain for long-term gain. Maybe. But that means we are now talking about predicting the future and determining whether the future is better, in a counterfactual, is better had we done this or had we not done this. So you have to look at the Iran war. And I oppose this war for two reasons. First, I believe that this war is going to create a media narrative that leads to more blowback and more terrorism from the Middle Eastern and from the Muslim countries onto America and onto the West. And second, I believe this is going to create a left-wing narrative to encourage more refugees and more immigration out of these countries into the West. I think the pragmatic results of this war are going to be an expansion of Islamic power and Islamic anti-Western philosophy into the West. That's what I'm predicting. And I'm making it a very falsifiable claim. If something else happens, I will have been wrong. And I will admit that I was wrong. But I am predicting we're going to spend tens or maybe hundreds of billions of dollars, that we are going to lose tens or hundreds, maybe thousands, but probably more in the tens, of American lives, of American soldiers, and that we are going to lead to blowback terrorism and a refugee crisis that the American and Western left invites into our countries. So to first address this point of terrorism, and you say, Iran's the #1 state sponsor of terrorism. Yeah, that's true. Yes, that's true. But what kind of terrorism? These are Shiite terrorists who are largely doing terrorists against other Middle Eastern targets, including our ally Israel. And maybe you want to say we're going to war for Israel. But if that's the case, then just admit it. It seems like Mike Johnson and Marco Rubio said things that alluded towards that. I try not to assume motives of people who I don't know, though. But if that's the case, if we are going to defend Israel from terrorism, then let's just say that. If we're going to defend Saudi Arabia or other Middle Eastern areas, if we're going to defend Sunni versus Shiite, if we're going to go back Sunnis in wars against terrorism, fair enough. If we're there to defend the Kurds, fair enough. Maybe that's the reason. But then say the reason is not for America, but it's for that. Talking about American-based terrorism, there's almost none. It's not zero. Going back the 47 years of this administration, it's not zero. But the idea that we have been at war with them for 47 years, that there's a secret, undeclared war this whole time, is just not true. We did the whole Iran-Contra thing, where they were our ally in trying to evade Congress to try to help fund the Contras in the 80s. After the hostage crisis and after the attacks in the early 80s. Yes, they messed with us in the Iraq war. And maybe we have an opposition of them since then. Maybe. But I'm not convinced it justifies this whole war system. They're not the #1 state sponsor of terrorism against us in any measurable or extremely damaging to Americans way. Since we invaded them, though, there's been a handful of terrorist attacks of people who seem to be upset that we killed their Ayatollah. Of people who seem to be upset that we are once again bombing the Middle East. Of people who seem to be upset that we killed almost 200 second grade girls. Just blew them up. We killed those people. Imagine if someone killed our Pope and then killed a bunch of our children. You think we'd be mad? You think we might fight back? Now imagine we were crazy anti-Western Muslims to begin with. Do you think that's going to make a person who is crazy but not active, who is an Islamist, who is a jihad sympathizer, who believes the West is evil, who believes in a strict Sharia law, who believes in a Shiite interpretation of Islam where the Ayatollah is the religious leader? If you were that person, and then we killed 170 children and we killed your religious leader, do you think that's going to make you more or less likely to commit terrorism in the West? Do they make you more or less likely to support the next Ayatollah? Do they make you more or less hate of America, death to America, down with America? More or less. If you were a moderate member of Iran, they're a moderate country. Keep in mind, Islam is crazy. Islam is anti-Western. Islam is not a religion that is compatible with Western values, with Western society, Western life. But if you're a moderate, you're someone who could go either direction, who doesn't actively support terrorism, and then you are told that the Americans just blew up your schoolgirls, that's a radicalizing force. That makes them more likely, and we've seen the terrorist attacks in the West go up, in America go up, since this war started. Oops, that's just blowback. No, you have to measure that. Oh, well, we can't negotiate with terrorists. I'm not saying you negotiate with them. I'm saying you don't provide ammunition to regular, everyday people to go do more of this. Number one state sponsor of terrorism, you just made them do more of that. The guy you replaced them with, the guy who they replaced him with, the son of the Ayatollah, is more radical, is more extreme, and just had his father killed. Is that guy, do you think that he is going to be more or less radical? That the new government is more or less radical? The Ayatollah insisted that it was against their religion and the other leaders there to build a nuclear weapon. Maybe you think they were lying, maybe, I don't know. But compared to the IRGC, the Ayatollahs were actually a moderating force. They were evil and they were crazy and they were terrorists and they were insane. But it might be out of the frying pan into the fire. When has this ever gone well? When has this ever gone? Did it get better when we got rid of Gaddafi in Libya? Did that make things better? Did the Syrian refugee crisis, which invaded Europe with many, many anti-Western Islamic people, did the rape crisis in Europe make it better? And now the guy who runs Syria is former ISIS? We used to have a bounty on his head, and now he's meeting with Donald Trump and meeting with other officials and, just like doing normal stuff? Did we make it better? Pragmatically, did it get better? Our interventions in Iran in the 50s, our interventions in Iran throughout this whole time, have we made it better pragmatically? When you look at what bin Laden said, and of course bin Laden was crazy, and I don't believe all the things he wrote, obviously, but when you see the system by which he recruited people, when he took someone who was already crazy and turned them into a terrorist, how? How? They hate us for our freedom. No, they fucking don't. No, they don't. No, the people who are doing this, who are on the ground, who are being converted to do these things, hate us because of the Islamic propaganda points, which we are handing them on a silver platter by killing their Ayatollah, by bombing their children, by having bases in places that they declare to be anti-Islamic jihad themselves. They think it's like the Crusades. And our interventions there are making them attack us. Not that we're culpable for those attacks. Not that we deserve those attacks. Not that those attacks are justified. They're crazy terrorism evil. But you have to establish whether we are increasing or decreasing the likelihood that that is going to happen. Handing the government over, as we so far had, the war isn't over. Maybe the moderate rebels, will be able to take over and we'll have a secular, lovely state there. I hope we do. I hope that happens. But it tends to be when you have civil war that the peace-loving good people don't win the civil war. It tends to be what we saw in Syria, where the ISIS guy wins the civil war. So why are we there? Okay, well, we're there because we're number one state sponsor of terrorism. Terrorism to who? Well, I don't know. Oh, why are we there? Oh, we're there because of regime change, because we have to get rid of this regime. But we promise it's not a regime change war. There'll be no boots on the ground. But we do have to change the regime. So it's not a regime change war, but we do need to change the regime. Hegseth and Trump, one of them says this is just getting started. The other says it's almost over. Then you ask Trump and he says it's both. It's like, no, it's actually not both. What's the plan? What's the justification? Oh, we're there to support the rebels who want to be free of the Ayatollah. So are we fighting on behalf of them or on behalf of us? Maybe we're fighting on behalf of them. Fair enough. You could just say that and then we could talk about whether that's good or not. But I'm not convinced those people who are going to win. I'm not convinced moderates will take over. When has that happened? When does that happen? Maybe it will this time. Maybe it'll only cost us $100 billion and a couple dozen American lives, and then we'll have a moderate government there. We'll have a republic where they can vote. If the Iranian people vote, there's a lot of secular people there who aren't crazy. And there's a lot of supporters of the Ayatollah who are crazy. And there's a lot of people who are even more crazy than that who support the IRGC. And if you are a person in between, which side just blew up a school full of children and killed a religious leader? Which side do you think you pushed the median Iranian towards by killing these children? When we bring in a Republican, let them vote, what do you think's going to happen? Because I actually don't know. I actually don't know. I don't think Trump knows. I don't think Hegseth knows. I don't think Rubio knows. I don't think any of them know. I think they're banking on some guess that maybe we'll be able to get a good Republican there. But they haven't laid out a plan. How long is it going to be? Days, not weeks. Weeks, not months. Months, not years. Uh-oh. Flash forward 15 years, we're still there, maybe. Or maybe we'll be out tomorrow and we'll leave right now and we'll be left with the guy who is more radical, whose father we just killed. Would that be good? No. So we had to stay for a little longer. How much longer? I don't know. Do you know? No. No, they said that they won't rule out a draft. I don't think they're going to draft. I don't think they will. But I don't think they know what they're going to do either. I don't think they know. So the first point of blowback, of increasing amount of terrorism, of possibly getting a worse state, as always has happened in our interventions there. I don't know what's going to happen next. But that's a concern that they haven't addressed. Second concern is the concern of refugees and of giving the left a talking point. I don't want to have imported a bunch of Syrians into Europe or into America. I don't think that's good for Europe and America. And I care a little bit about Europe because I believe in having a shared cultural identity with them. But I care mostly about America and the mass waves of immigration out of Somalia and other these places. The reason that these people are coming here is partially, not fully, but partially because the left feels bad about our wars in Somalia, about our wars in Yemen, about our wars in Syria, about our wars in Libya, our wars. How many? I don't even know. Because none of them are wars. Oh, well, that's a targeted interaction. Oh, well, that's a police campaign. Oh, well, that's no acts of Congress or limited acts of Congress. They haven't declared war. So how many are there? I don't know. Do you know? No. No, they're hard to count because we'll end up funding one side to fight the other side who we're also funding. We get to the point where we're funding bin Ladenite terrorists. That's ridiculous. We get to the point where we're funding the Bazi Bachi boy guys who are raping 11 to 14-year-old boys to go fight the Taliban. That's ridiculous. And maybe you say pragmatically we have to do it. Pragmatically, we're choosing a lesser of two evils. Well, explain to me how this has gotten less evil. Explain to me how this has gotten better. Explain to me how anything over there is better. Because all that's happened is we have more terrorism, more blowback. They're using our wars as recruitment for them to do more terrorism and more blowback. And then we have a refugee crisis, which the American left says, oh, look what we did over there. And they were already terrible places. It's not fully our fault, but it's partially our fault. It's not that we had nothing to do with it. And I don't think we should let those people in. But when you're talking, you have to win PR battles. You have to change hearts and minds. You have to recognize the pragmatic influence of these policies. And when you destroy countries, the average American feels bad for having done that, and for good reason. And then they say, we have to import these people. We need to let refugees in. We need to make sure that these people have better lives, because we did it to them. And they're not entirely wrong about that. And so the mass migration that comes in from these places, that is destroying America, that is not America first. That is not good for the country. That is not good for Christianity. That is not good for capitalism or nationalism or any of the things I actually care about. I'm not concerned with foreign policy deeply. I think it matters. I think it's pragmatic, but I'm not deeply concerned. I'm concerned with what happens here. I'm concerned with my groceries. I'm concerned with whether my children will grow up in the West. I'm concerned with whether I will get to enjoy the birthright that my father and grandfather and great-grandfather fought for, that they built. I'm concerned with these things. I'm concerned with an America First agenda. And what this seems to do is give credence to the anti-America people, to import more anti-American people, to destroy America. And you say, oh, well, that's just a second order effect. Like, yeah, it is. And you have to measure second order effects. There is no principled war. There is no good war. No, we killed a bunch of children. There's only pragmatic war. And the pragmatic impacts of this war seem to be more blowback and more migrants. Civil war, the destruction of a semi-stable state. What happens next? Maybe everything will go great. Maybe everything will go great. It never has. It never has. It never once has. But maybe it will this time. What are you willing to risk? How many blowback terrorist attacks are you willing to risk? How many dead school children in Iran are you willing to risk? How many new migrants out of the refugee crisis that gets created from this to America are you willing to risk? Because for me, it's very little. Because for me, I kind of don't care about the Middle East. Not that I don't have any opinions on it, I clearly do, but they're not my concern. America's my concern. I'm an American. America is for Americans. Every single military action needs to be justified through one lens, and one lens only, because this is all that matters, is how is this good for Americans? Explain to me how my life, how the lives of my children, how the lives of my grandchildren, how the lives of my friends and family, of my coworkers, of my classmates, of everybody who is American, whose American taxpayers are funding this war, whose American soldiers are dying in this war. Explain to me how this is good for us. Because I'm not buying it. And I don't have Iran syndrome or whatever they're calling it these days. Because I'm willing to hear an explanation. But every time I get an explanation, someone else in the administration comes out the next day and gives the opposite explanation. We're not doing nation building. We have to build up this nation. We're not there for Israel. They're doing terrorism against Israel. We're not there for the rebels. Well, they killed 30,000 rebels, so we have to go save them. We're going to be there almost over. We're almost done. This war is just ramping up. We're there for the nuclear threat. We destroyed their nuclear threat. We are there because they might build up soon. This was an imminent threat that was coming to us right now. It's like, no. No, it's one or the other. And maybe it's neither. Or maybe they have no fucking clue what they're talking about. This is the worst war propaganda ever. I don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. And every person who I talk to who attempts to defend this war gives a mutually unintelligible, cannot be at the same time, cannot be mutually exclusive explanation of this war. I'm predicting now that this war becomes a quagmire, that it goes way longer than we expect, that we end up with refugees, that we end up with blowback, like we already have. I'm not predicting some World War III catastrophe that decimates the world. The Iraq War, even the Vietnam War, which I don't think is going to be as bad as either of those. I think it's going to be really bad, but not as bad as those. And both of those we survived. It was okay. It was fine. But it was bad. And I'm not panicking. I'm not panicking for saying this might go bad. And they haven't pitched it to us to convince me of it. And that given our track record with doing similar things, it's pretty damn hard to convince me of it. I'm on record now, March 12th, saying I do not support this war. And we'll check back in 6 months to a year. And I hope, I pray, I hope I'm wrong. I will gladly come out and say I was wrong. Because I want to be wrong. I want this to be good for America. But I don't think it is. America is for Americans. And this seems bad for Americans. Thank you. I'm Jake Huffaker. This has been Morally Right.